use some of the points that I have made in my public lecture that was given in Chinese. So I'm going to summarize just a small part of it from that lecture, because it was a very long lecture and I believe that I spoke for more than 2 hours without knowing it. So I will summarize a few important points that I feel are particularly important and relevant for us who are practicing the Dhamma. My lectures to the public are not meant to be academic, even though I have the habit of getting a bit involved in an academic way, but I think largely I managed to make the Dhamma being shared relevant to the ordinary practitioners of the Dhamma. Now, one of the points I made in the lecture is I started with the historical Buddha and showed that his doctrine of karma is not a doctrine of absolute determinism. It is a doctrine which says that definitely much of what we experience, the way we behave, the way we respond to things in this existence are actually determined by our past karma in ways that we don't even know. We have done a lot of good karma, a lot of so-called bad karma, and these conditionings are very, very powerful. And I think one of the failures of modern counseling, psychotherapy, and all these popular things, is that they cannot take into account the samsaric perspective. You can't solve problem in the true sense without going to the roots of problems thoroughly, deeply. And that means, among other things, going back to the context of samsaric existence. All modern theories and modern therapies, they deal only with this life, and at best, they will try to analyze the so-called childhood experiences. But also in a way that is sometimes very negatively, sometimes in a very destructive way that confuses actually the person undergoing the therapy. Because even if you want to talk about a person's past experience, his experiences are firstly related to his whole environment, his whole background. Even if you don't talk about samsara, don't talk about rebirth, you have to take into consideration that his problem is not an isolated problem, the way he reacts to things. Different people have different experiences, and for some, there are no negative effect at all. And sometimes certain experiences that we might interpret as negative, for them it may be useful experiences for them. Yeah? And it depends on the culture you come from, the background you have come from, even your own genetic makeup, how you react to things, how your chemicals are within your body. And if a therapist tries to just analyze things in a very mechanical way, and just observing from outside and just listening to the patient's account and so on, such a therapy cannot get through insight into the context of problem. I'm not just talking about the context of only this present existence. The person's problem, for instance, a child, can be related to the way he was brought up. the other experiences, surrounding him as a child, and the society he was born into, and the influence of the parents and people around him, and his schooling, etc. So there's so many things. So it's not just his problem, not just his reaction, positive or negative. I have said many times that even in the West, it is recognized that some of the so-called traumatic experiences, for some people they are not traumatic at all. Similar thing happen in the East. Sometimes in times of war, in terms of very tragic situations, but these things they didn't harm the young children. But of course, when they go to the West, when they listen to all the new theories and people are saying to them, oh, you have gone through this, you have gone through that, you suffer this, they suddenly begin to suffer. There are many examples like that, and I have explained already, I don't want to repeat too much. So there are so many things to look into. It's not just the theoretical knowledge of the so-called counselor or therapist. And that is why, personally, I prefer to stick to the Buddha's teaching. This counseling theory, these therapy theories, they change from time to time, every 3 or 4 years, 5 years, they have new versions. And sometimes very contradictory accounts also. Just like the way sometimes we are told that eggs are not good for us, and now they say eggs are not so bad actually. Coconuts were said to be very bad for us, and now the coconut has become one of the magic food, magic health food. So it's like that. Many things. Recently I read on the internet about this diet that bestows us with long life, and they studied certain group of Japanese in certain areas, and they were trying to find out why these people live so long, And of course there are genetic factors and so on, but they believe that there are other factors, including their food and so on. And when they analyzed the food of the people there, they found that actually they have almost about 90% of carbohydrates. People say, oh, carbohydrate is so bad to you, you better have a, what do you call that, a diet. You should be on diet, and you shouldn't have food that's high in carbohydrate and so on. But these people have about 90% the food, 90% carbohydrate, about 10% of protein, and that seems to be according to some even modern scientists, that seemed to be the best combination. After reading that, suddenly I thought, oh, it's okay to have more noodles, I was a bit worried. I have been worried, having too much noodles and potatoes, but it seemed okay. So it's like this. I think, of course, we cannot be starving, we have to be open, and the Buddha has taught us, to be open also, objective also. So, we look forward to these so-called discoveries by modern investigators, but I think ultimately we have to depend on of what we call wisdom, insight, that are acquired by people who are enlightened, I think, like the Buddha and like the great spiritual masters. Anyway, coming back to the theory of the doctrine of karma, I was saying that if we want to solve our so-called psychological problems, and in fact, first thing is we have to realize that we mustn't create problems for ourselves. Especially Asian people, I've said many times, don't transport problems from modern Western culture into our own cases. We get confused. Suddenly everything becomes problem. You speak like they do, you think you're so clever, you're so learned. I have read this book, this is my best book, that's my best book, this is my best author. You don't realize that you're being influenced by them in a way that can be very harmful to you. Because you have never thought of this thing as being problem, but you begin to have problems when you try to force yourself into the mentality of alien culture and alien background, alien upbringing, alien Western value system. This is something I think the Asian people must be increasingly aware of. Even poverty, for instance, backwardness. In older days, people never thought, in Asian countries, they didn't think these are problems. You know, you live in a poor country and a village, and you are happy, and you're contented, and you have your family, you have your children, you have your relations, and you have your teachers. You know, many things happen, but you are not affected in a negative way. And you don't think that I suffer because I'm deprived, I'm downtrodden. Look at the Westerners, look at Americans, they have big TVs, they have big cars, they have bigger and bigger houses, they have good income. Then you begin to suffer. Suddenly you begin to suffer. And simple example is when you look around your neighborhood. My neighbors are earning more money than I am, you know, living in better houses. That if you think like that, if your value change in that direction, then you're going to suffer. Otherwise, you have not been suffering. You know, I lived in Asian countries also for a long time, and in Sri Lanka, and also India. I lived for some time, and I felt that the people were happier, at least in those days. I think things become more complicated now. Maybe it's a bit difficult to say with respect to some poor areas in India. They also felt that they have been deprived and downtrodden, and you can understand their sufferings. But you know, I felt that the poor people, they live a happier life, contented life. They didn't react like that. When they were brainwashed by the politicians, you know, by the so-called educated people, you know, by the so-called intellectuals, then they begin to suffer. So anyway, coming back to our topic of the Buddha's teaching of karma, we have to, one point I emphasize that we have to be aware of the samsaric perspective. And from this perspective, much of what's happening to us are determined by our karma. And sometimes we feel quite helpless. It's not that you have chosen to be born, say, in Hong Kong, but you happen to be in Hong Kong. Or that you have chosen to be born in Africa, and maybe you move out of Africa or a village in China, and then you go out and look at the world, and you feel that, oh, I had been suffering, now I'm liberated, you know. I've told you a story of, for instance, some of my friends in Sri Lanka, like, for example, in the case of one intelligent young novice, you remember? And he was from a monastery, and he had good education, he was intelligent, and so on. He grew up, he got a scholarship, and then he went to study in America. Then, of course, he began to adopt their values, and he began to think, oh, I have been suffering as a child, as a novice, you know. And he reacted, he rejected his tradition. I think he began to suffer seriously that way. He didn't have to. Maybe had he remained in Sri Lanka, he would have succeeded in a spiritual way. He would have made contribution in terms of teaching Buddhism. Anyway, this is just one possibility and one small example. So this is what we have to be aware of, this perspective of rebirth and samsara and our karma. Bear in mind those facts and you will feel happier. You'll be able to accept yourself better and accept others. Compassionate to yourself and compassionate to others. Much more. And understand your problems, relate your problems to your karma, for instance. But on the other hand, I also stress very firmly that in the Buddha's teaching, the Buddha's karma teaching, as I said earlier, definitely it's not a doctrine of fatalism, not doctrine of absolute determinism. It's not that everything has been determined from the past and nothing we can do. It's not that. Though I said that we have to be aware of some very, very strong pressure on us, from our past karma. So we saw that according to the Buddha's teaching, starting from the suttas themselves, for instance, the Nonapada Sutta, the Buddha teaches that how we experience the effect of karma depends on our state, our spiritual status, if you like. Two persons commit the same karma, but they may experience the effect differently. If one person is well developed spiritually and he meditates and he develops a wisdom and he has faith and he has commitment, he makes aspirations, he uplifts himself from different levels of his unconscious, uplifts himself spiritually, such a person would not be at all severely affected by that karma. Another person who has committed the same karma can be affected very seriously in a very negative way. If he is one who doesn't have any sense of morality, doesn't do meditation, doesn't develop his mind, etc., etc. We saw that. This teaching is very inspiring and has become, from what I understand, it has become a guiding principle for later Buddhist teachers to develop their doctrines of karma in all different schools. You see that all the development in Abhidharma and even in Mahayana are ultimately traceable to the inspiration from this teaching of the Buddha. That's, by the way, one reason why, even if you're just interested in Mahayana, you should go to the very source. You should go to early Buddhism. And it's not a sectarian emphasis and trying to tell you that Theravada teachings are more important. It's not in that sense, but you see that there are a lot of developments. I mean, if you study Abhidharma, if you study Mahayana, you realize that these developments are actually inspired or based on teaching from the earliest period and sutras that we find in the Pali, in the Agamas, and so on. So the same applies to the teaching of karma. So this is one point that I have emphasized. And then in terms of development that is inspired by the teaching of the Buddha in the sutras, we saw that in the Abhidharma tradition, there came to be a very clear teaching of karma that is krita and karma that is upachitta. I hope some of you can understand and remember this. Karma that is done and karma that is accumulated. In Chinese, it is 所做同埋增長，業嘅所做同埋業嘅增長。So a karma, though it is done, and when it is done, it's going to have a corresponding effect. But the way the effect is experienced by the doer depends on various factors. One important one is whether the karma comes to be accumulated or not. So that idea of accumulating one's karma, that I think is a very important teaching for us. You know, a very important teaching that we can apply in our living life. It doesn't matter what kind of bad karma we have done, and often quite against our will. Something happened, something is done. But if you realize that it's not skillful for you, it's not helpful for you and for others, you can do many other things. For instance, you have if you have a sense of sincerity to try to improve yourself, if you feel repentance, if you feel kindness, especially, if you've done something that is out of your ignorance, out of your lack of kindness, start doing something kindly. Be more compassionate. To think more about others. You know, doing more and more good, etc., etc. And these are so-called accumulations. Accumulation can be in a positive way, it can be a negative way. If you have done something that is unskillful, but you continue to do unskillful things more and more, and you don't have sincerity, you don't feel that no, I'm not good enough, and I have to improve myself. You don't have that kind of sense of repentance, sincerity, and if I'm not good in one aspect, I can be good in another aspect. One thing that everybody can develop is to be more kind. Everybody can be. To care more about others, care more about mankind, care more about, you know, your fellow beings. Feel the suffering of others, and always think, what can I do to help others, to make them suffer less? Now these things, spiritually, can be very helpful to elevate you from the possible effect of karma, bad karma. So this is accumulations. If the person who has done something bad and he goes on to, you know, to be egotistical, I'm not wrong, you know, I'm like that, why do you blame me, and that kind of attitude, you know, and no sincerity, no kindness, no meditation, and special meditation, then you never change. Even if you know, why do I say a special meditation? You saw that in my lecture I quoted, for instance, great Abhidharma Master Sanghabhadra, when he talks about this possibility of transforming in some form, to some extent, of certain karma, he emphasizes those terms like vows, like meditation, like cultivation of samadhi and prajna. We saw those terms. You know, usually we think of them as just mere scholars, but they're not really just mere scholars. You have to remember that they were monks, practicing monks. They were just trying to understand the Buddha teaching in a scholarly way, but you can't blame them for that. But they have a lot of feelings. They emphasize those things. Those terms occur. So even if they say that certain karma can be transformed, they are not fixed in terms of you know, whether karma, the effect is going to actually ripen or not. And if it does ripen, whether it will ripen in a way that will harm you, harm you seriously or not. All those things are not faith. So when they emphasize those things, they speak of these terms: meditation, making vows, faith in the Dhamma and so on. They know that these are powerful forces that really can transform us, can change us, not our thoughts. You can be very clever, you know everything about what is kusala, akusala, what is skillful, unskillful, so what? Knowledge is one thing. It will not make you change. Yeah? They will not help you spiritually unless you uplift yourself to higher levels of consciousness, unless you uplift yourself spiritually. And for that, you must develop the spiritual emotions, your faith, your commitment, and your values, your mindfulness. People talk about mindfulness. How can we simply get mindfulness? We cannot say, much as we like, we cannot have it unless we develop it systematically. And that implies so many things. First thing, you align yourself ethically, live a life that is conducive to it, a simpler life, a life of less attachment, a life of compassion, a life of Dhamma, and a life under the inspiration of the Dhamma all the time, etc., etc. Then you come to develop your mindfulness. Then you come to be, what I've just said, elevated, uplifted spiritually. It cannot happen just by your intellectual knowledge. And by the way, that is why although we are all very busy, I'm suddenly just now writing, and I'm hoping to produce another smaller book this year. And I just simply don't have the time. I just came back from India teaching for a whole month. And I'm going to teach again in Shanghai next month. But in between, a lot of work to do. But we can't make excuses. So now, today also, yesterday also, I spent time with the student. Today, I'm leading these sessions, devotional sessions, meditation sessions, sharing Dhamma with you. Because these are important things. We can't make excuses. This is what I mean by living, what I mean by life. We are certainly we are not perfect. We don't have to pretend to be perfect. There's no need for that. But imperfect as we are, there are these minimum conditions of your commitment, your sincerity, and your kindness, your inspiration, continuous inspiration from the Dhamma. So with this, we persevere, we progress. That is why we, in spite of what you might call busy schedule, and we nevertheless never forget the practice of Dhamma. So coming back to the karma doctrine, the message is that even if you understand the doctrine, for it to really work for you, really help you, it must be in your heart, it must be in your feeling, you must be able to feel it. So you must live a life that helps you to feel it. People can come to the lecture, I think that night maybe 800, 900, I don't know how many people are there, but they can just listen and just go away. Or they just go back and chat and say, oh, it's very exciting and inspiring. But the inspiration can last only for 1 or 2 days, 1 or 2 weeks. So we have to, on our part, a lot had to be done. We have to kind of prepare ourselves for us to be benefited by the Dhamma. As I speak, I feel inspired. I hope I'm being transformed. That's the important part. Not just speaking, not just lecturing, not just giving Dhamma as a duty, as a profession. People tend to think like that, as a performance. It's not that. When you really say and share something that you really feel sincerely and truly, that experience itself is very uplifting, very, very helpful spiritually. And these are things that help us. So the same thing applies to the listeners, the learner, the students. There's a lot of preparation to be done on their part for a spiritual sermon, religious sermon, or a desana. Desana means a preaching. To be able to help them truly in a spiritual way. Your life, first of all, must be aligned. In your heart, there must be sincerity. There must be faith. And your spiritual emotion must be stirred up. You can listen to me, I say the same thing, but you are just sometimes intellectually excited for 5 minutes. If that happens, hopefully that happens. If what I say makes you think and begin to affect you in a positive way, then that is the effect of sharing the Dhamma. So this is a very important awareness that we might have, and I have said that in the canon, in the scriptures, there are stories where the preacher, as he preaches, he becomes enlightened. He becomes enlightened. That's what is meant by creative education. The teacher also becomes so inspired. And of course the listener also. We have heard the story of Bahia, for instance. Just listening to Buddha, just a very brief preaching. How come it works in his case, not in our case? But that's because he has been fully spiritually prepared. So to be benefited by the Dhamma as a creative process of transformation, you must be prepared. So the doctrine of karma also is not just an intellectual doctrine. It's not just an exciting lecture. I chose it because I thought it's very helpful for all of us, including myself and all others. Even I have to remind myself all the time. So, coming back to the doctrine itself, one important point we made is that there is this distinction between a karma that is done and karma that is accumulated. So we have to learn to accumulate. To accumulate means, as I said, not just intellectual understanding, but sincerity, faith within you, faith in the doctrine of the Dhamma, of the Buddha, in the principle of dependent originations, faith in the possibility of growth, spiritual growth. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter how much you understand, how much you listen, it won't help you very much. That is, I have emphasized those things. Besides, I also talk about towards the end, important aspect, that is the karmic hindrance. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to elaborate too much that night, but I think I make the important points. I think even as Mahayana Buddhists here in Hong Kong, a popular, very commonly known and chanted verse of transcendence of merit, it's an aspiration to eliminate the threefold hindrances. Hindrance of defilement, hindrance of karma, hindrance of vipaka. 三障，燃燒三障諸煩惱. Wonderful stanza you chant, but make sure you do it mindfully. It's good mindfulness practice, important mindfulness practice, and sincerely. You really make vows, learn to aspire, that you want to overcome these 3 4 hindrances. Now in the context of that stanza, of course, it speaks of the defilements of the 3 4 hindrances. But of course, out of the 3 hindrances, one is also called defilement hindrance. So the defilement of these hindrances means the defilement in the sense of that which perturbs, us, that which obstructs our spiritual growth. Anything that perturbs us in that way is a defilement. So defilement hindrance itself is also a defilement. Defilement karma is a defilement. Defilement karma is a hindrance. Defilement itself is a hindrance, and the retribution of karma is also a hindrance. But when you look carefully, actually these 3 so-called hindrances are actually centered around karma. Because karma actually arises from defilements. Without these negativities, there won't be karma. So the Arhats and Buddhas are above the scope of karma, if you like. That's why they don't have to come back to samsara. So, from this perspective, karma hindrances, defilement hindrance actually, basically karma hindrance. And the third one you can see clearly, the so-called vipaka or retribution hindrance, retribution of what? Also of karma. You see, the whole 3 4 hindrance center around the emphasis on karma as the hindrance. Its cause and its effect. In that context, I was able to find a little bit of time to share with you one advice by the Buddha in the Mahayana Sutra. And that sutra is called the Ugra Paripricha, the question of Ugra, or Ugradatta sometimes. So that's the name of an elder in the Buddha's time, and that sutra itself is one of the oldest Mahayana Sutra. It's very interesting because in that sutra, a lay person trying to practice the Bodhisattva path. He wants to know how to do it, how to practice it. And he asked for advice, and he was taught. And a lot of things I have said, and in my lectures, Mahayana lecture in Hong Kong, also I have cited this, at least to some extent, not so fully. But that day I was able to show you the Chinese text and explain to you the sentences carefully. You see, the Buddha has told a layman aspiring to practice the Bodhisattva path, he must not look down upon the monks, the monastic sangha. Normally people think, the Mahayana ideal is always superior, and the Bodhisattva is always superior than a monk. If you take Bodhisattva vow, immediately you are above even the bhikkhu, And that kind of, unfortunately, that kind of negative teaching came into the Mahayana movement. But Mahayan movement itself is a very profound movement. I always say that, and you can say that the true Mahayan ideal is not like that. Doesn't emphasize like that. Doesn't teach like that. So we saw this is a good example in that sutta. You see, the Buddha gives advices to a lay practitioner who wants to follow the Bodhisattva ideal, and he is told to respect the monk and to feel kindness towards the monk, to go to the temple to ask for teachings from the monk, humbly, sincerely. It's very touching. And when you go to the monastery, you say, "Oh, this is a monastery. I live in a Mahayana temple. We are not like that." You see. And you feel, oh, how wonderful the monks are living there. They are dedicated to life. They are struggling. It's not easy to be a monk. So even as a lay Mahayana practitioner, you have to feel that way. For you to be benefited by even the Bodhisattva, Mahayana Bodhisattva ideal. Now, one of the things, there's so many things I said already regarding this in my lectures, in other lectures. That night, one of the things I pointed out is in regard to Ugra meeting monks who have transgressed the Vinaya rules. That's a very interesting part. And the Buddha says, the Bodhisattva practitioner must not despise these monks who have made mistakes, who have broken the Vinaya rules. We must be kind to them and respect them with understanding. But after all, they represent the Sangha. And importantly, they transgress the precepts often not because they want to, but because they are impelled, they are driven by defilements within. So these defilements, they are from their karmas. A lot of them are from past karma. What can a person do when these forces are so strong? So we have to understand the behavior even of a monk or a nun. You know, monks and nuns are just as ordinary people. They are not saints. They are human beings. So you have to reflect. You are also like that. You are also a lay person. You are also not a saint. So you mustn't think you are so superior just simply because you understand more teachings and rules, or just simply because you happen not to have broken a certain rules, or you are able to observe the 5 precepts well. It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything in the sense of you being higher above those monks who have transgressed the precept. So the Buddha tells Ugra, you mustn't despise these monks. You must understand that it is not that, really speaking, it is not that they want to transgress like that. They want to break the rules, but because they are driven, they are impelled by this defilement, strong defilement within. And then the Buddha goes on to say, in fact, you, not only the monk, you mustn't judge others like this, like too lightly, too contemptuously. When a practitioner fails or breaks a rule. You know, those teachings are very, very touching, very, very inspiring. And they are teachings that really we can apply, we can practice. This is what I mean by kindness. This is what I mean by commitment. This is what I mean by sincerity. We can practice. It's not just to the monks or nuns, but to other people around us, and to ourselves also. With the understanding, awareness of the powerful driving forces of karma. And karma in the past we don't even know. And in fact, talking about karma, I mentioned about collective karma also. Sometimes It's the collective karma that is driving you in a crazy society, in a crazy culture, in a crazy time. And I talked just now about some negative, or at least a very different, not necessarily usual conditioning from the West very system. We got them. This is part of our collective karma. We are in that system. We were educated in that kind of system. So we live in, for instance, Hong Kong as a colonized country for such a long time. You were brought up in the English education mainly, and you were so proud that you got a good background and you got a good job and good institution. All these things are actually harming you. Now that is sometimes part of the collective karma, right? As a result of which you find yourself in such negative conditionings. So when you understand like that, of course you can be kind to yourself also. You can forgive yourself. You can forgive others. Like the way the Buddha advises Ukra. You read those passages again and again and think they will help you very much. And as I was preparing to give this lecture, and in my hurry, in my busy schedule, and I dig out some of the notes and I read them again, and every time I read this thing, it touched me. Not that I'm just preparing to give a lecture. It's not like that. You see? It's like a mindfulness. It's a mindfulness practice. So this is the way we have to understand the teaching of karma. And that should make us more realistic about spiritual progress, realistic about making mistakes by us and by others, and should make us more understanding, more accepting, more kind to ourselves and others, and make us have more confidence that in spite of the fact that many things really are so powerful in terms of karmic influences, hindrance on us, but there's always hope. There's always an element of freedom in us. Things can change. Karma can be transformed. And in the lecture I mentioned, for instance, one group of ancient Buddhist masters called the Darshtantikas in the Sarvasti Order tradition. They believe that all karmas can be changed. Even the most serious types, even the so-called 5 great sins. You know what I mean? Like killing father, killing mother, and so on. According to the gender Buddhist traditions, including the Abhidhamma tradition, if one commits any one of these, the effect is definitely fixed. They're destined to be born in hell and suffer there. But according to this group of masters, they say, no, even these most serious karmas can be transformed. That depends on our mind. That depends on our mental state, our spiritual upliftment, our improvement within. So there are so many things about the karma theory, but these are things that really can, I hope, inspire us, can touch us, and can be applied in our life. I think that's enough for today's sharing. We will proceed now to make offerings to the Buddha.